Hi, in this lesson we'll talk a little bit about architecture and data architecture. In order to understand the bigger picture of working with data engineering or data science, you need to have a thought about the architecture. What kind of architecture that when you use Databricks, you should be working with and that will best delivers your requirements and meets your goals. There is in every data, what is like data applications or big data lakes application, you're always going to see this kind of high level architecture. The first thing is you will have a source system. Call it the source for short. And then you will need storage layer. And then you're going to need an engine, a data integration engine. Call it data integration. And you're going to need a data processing engine. And then you will need a serving engine, data serving engine. I'm going to explain all this component together. So serving. You also, part of the data processing, you're going to need some data orchestration. And for all of them, you will need data governance. Maybe doesn't include the source system. It's like inside the lake or inside the lake house. This is governance. And this is where your users of your data will work. This is the primary component when you work with data applications and big data application. This is the kind of component, the high level component that you wanted to work with. Now, what is the rules and responsibility for each and every component in this architecture? Let's examine that. For the source system, this is where the data originates. This is where data is collected, data for operational systems. Like if you are in a retail business, your customers create orders. Your orders go somewhere in the database, right? MySQL database or a Postgres, whatever database. This is called, we call from the data analytics perspective, we call them the source system. Because data in these systems are kind of the data that was captured from the users. And from analytics perspective, this is the source data that we need to analyze. So in all the reference architecture you're going to see for big data analytics, you will see always these databases or these systems we call the source system. That's the role of this layer. Now, data in the source system are stored in some formats. Could be a database, could be something else, could be files, could be Excel files, whatever the format is. You need some component to move the data from this source system and put it inside the storage. And this is where it comes the data integration component. It's a component where it just moves data from one place to another. Does nothing else. Just moving data from one location to another location. We call it data integration component. There is several tools in the market that can do that. Even a simple copy-paste command is a kind of data integration in a sense that it moves data from one place to another. So it moves the data from the source system and put it inside the storage or in the storage. That's the whole thing. Does nothing else. Copy data or move or copy data from source system, put it inside the storage. Now, once the data is landed inside the storage, you will need a processing engine or a data analytics engine that you need to use in order to read data from storage and start processing them. And this is where the data processing part will kick in. Sometimes your data processing part will split into multiple pieces. You don't really want to do everything in one code or one file, or like data modularity or code modularity. You need to do some code modularity. So if you write your code in different pieces, different files, different modules, you need to orchestrate this module. This is where data orchestration comes in. Also, data orchestration, if you have multiple pipelines, By the way, moving data from this whole thing is called a pipeline. Like moving data from a source system, start processing and start serving. We call this a pipeline. Like data move from one place to another, we call it a pipeline. That's why you need orchestration if you wanted to create multiple pipelines and make it run in a sequence or a workflow. After you do that, then you need users to access the data. You did the analytics, your machine learning, your dashboard or whatever thing that you have produced out of the data analytics. You wanted to serve it to your customers or serve it to the people who are entitled to read or see this analytics. We call this the serving part. So the serving part is all about giving access to data for other people to to see the data or to see analytics. So this is where the users comes in. So this is at a high level. This is what we call, by the way, modern data stack. Data stack. Abstract, like not specific to any technology. Now let's map this to Databricks. Put this on the side here. Let's see if you use Databricks, how you would do that. So you will typically leave the source system as is. So call it the source system. Nothing to do about this really. Now on Azure, the data integration architecture or the data integration component that you use, you can use anything, but typically on Azure, people use Azure Data Factory. We call it Azure Data Factory, EDF. Azure Data Factory is just a system from Azure that you point it to data source, like a database, and say, okay, I wanted you to copy data from this data source every 1 hour and put the files into the storage. From Azure perspective, again, the storage layer is called EDLS. EDLS. Azure Data Lake Storage. That's the storage part. Now, data processing part is Databricks. Databricks engine in general. That also includes a component for orchestration. It's called Databricks Workflows. Again, this is also part of Databricks. What about governance? You wanted to know who accessed what, when, and what did they do with the data, and so on. In Databricks, this component is called Unity Catalog. Unity Catalog. So this is like a component inside Databricks that makes it easy for you to control the access. I wanted to know who accessed which data, what did they do, who deleted this file, who deleted this record, this kind of thing. Now, you have orchestration, you have processed your data, you did your machine learning, your AI and everything. You wanted to serve the data to customers. So in Databricks, serving the data is called Databricks DB SQL, Databricks SQL. Again, it's a component inside Databricks that makes you serve the data to customers. So if there is a customer here who wanted to see data, he will connect or she will connect to DB SQL to read the data that has been prepared and so on. So this is at the high level, the architecture that you would work with Databricks. Why we need this? Because quite often you wanted to have a map in your mind about what is the component you work with. Am I doing data integration? Yes, I need to move data from source system to Databricks. I can use Databricks, by the way. I can remove EDF and use Databricks. Databricks can actually read data directly from the source system. However, standardizing, people usually standardize that on Azure, use EDF because it's much more efficient, much more, it's like a drag and drop interface. You don't need to write code. And your job is not really moving data from source to storage. Your data is processing data and building analytics. So don't waste time doing the heavy lifting of moving data from one place to another. Use a component in Azure, which is pretty good at this job. So once you do that, then data is on ADLS storage, Azure Data Lake Storage. Then you can use Databricks clusters to read the data from the storage, process the data. Now you're going to create multiple pipelines, which is one pipeline moving data from source system until it becomes a database in Databricks. Create another pipeline and so on. Let's say 4 or 5 pipelines, but you wanted to run them in sequence, right? Then you need orchestrator. In Databricks terms, this orchestrator is called Databricks workflow. So we're going to use Databricks workflow. Now you wanted to access, control access. I need this user group to access this table, but I need this user group not access this table. Or I need this user group to have a read-only access to the table, but this one have a read and write. You're going to play with combinations of permissions and how these permissions interact. We call this a Unity catalog inside Databricks, which is the best, catalog experience you would get in Databricks by specifying permissions, creating the data lineage. Data lineage is like, I wanted to know this table is coming from which tables. So like you create a table from which is a join between 2 other tables. You can tell from visual graphs and so on. Very powerful feature from Databricks Unity Catalog. Now, after you build all this, you manage your data, you build the permission model and all this, you wanted user to access the data. In Databricks terms, this user can access database from something called DB-SQL, Databricks SQL, which is the gateway for all the data inside the Lakehouse or inside Databricks. So people will connect to the DB-SQL using standard JDBC connector, or if they have a tool like Power BI from Microsoft, they can use the tool and the tool can connect to Databricks. Whichever way they prefer. Some organization will have Power BI, some organization will have Looker, some has Tableau. Whatever tool that you wanted to use, it's all supported inside DB-SQL, so you can connect, use, and see the data or dashboards, whatever you wanted to see from Databricks. And we call this the Lakehouse architecture. Lakehouse. This is a Lakehouse. So what is a Lakehouse architecture? It's the equivalent of the modern data stack architecture, or the Lakehouse is pretty much a modern data stack architecture where you can do machine learning, AI, BI, data warehousing, AI, ML. You can do all of it in one place, and it's governed. There is workflow engine, there is processing engine, there is serving engine, data integration engine, there is a storage engine. There's everything in one place. We call it the Lakehouse. And that's the architecture that you need to think of. So every time you build a data application or a big data analytics project, this is the kind of architecture that you need to think of. There is a source system, integration, blah, blah, blah. This is, and you need to think of this architecture because this is the best architecture now that can serve your need. So that's it for this lesson, and see you in the next lesson.